Okay, we're going to talk about creating your graffiti design and beginning your drawing. So by this point you should have a concept or idea that you've come up with on graffiticreator.net. This is not a very good example of what I would like you to do. First of all, the spacing is not great on these letters. You can see there's a little too much space between the J and the U. I think it would be more pleasing to the eye if I worked on these spaces a little bit. And also the sizing, like the J looks a little small compared to the U. So I really want you to carefully consider how you're laying out your letters on Graffiti Creator before you turn it in to be printed. You don't need to do this from a printed paper. You can just look at your tablet. So go to graffiticreator.net. Make sure you're choosing the style of lettering that you'd like to go with, and then think about the colors, the pattern, the design. I did this one kind of quickly, but I had a gradient, I've got some bubbles, I've got some stripes. And then don't be overwhelmed by too much information. We're going to break it down one step at a time, okay? The first thing that I want you to do is map out your drawing. No matter what you're drawing, you want to come up with like a good plan for the space. So I always map out my composition no matter what I'm doing, whether it's a portrait or a landscape or lettering like this. You want to make sure that you have the right space and that you're not like getting to the last letters and having to cram them into the end. So when you do this, just write your name in normal letters. I'm going to do this a little darker so you can see it, but you should use a really, really, really light pencil so we can erase it later. So I'm going to just put in the letters of my name, and this could be a nickname. It doesn't need to be your actual name. I think I'll go with a nickname, so I'm going to do Jules. And you can go back and erase if you make a mistake. A lot of times what happens is you start big and you run out of room. So here I've got my Jules. You can it's going to be backwards, but you can see it. I've made the E a little smaller so it fits in that empty space of the L a little better. There's not a whole bunch of space there. Once you have just the regular line drawing done, then you can look at the shape of the letters on your design and start to block it off. So what I mean by that is I'm looking at this J, and just take your time with this. This is tricky, but you can do it. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're using this as a guide, and you can improvise off of this. So if you don't want to do it exactly like the plan looks, then don't. So I'm kind of looking at each line one at a time so I don't get overwhelmed, and going around my guideline. Alright, you can't really see what I'm doing, but I just went through and used that initial J as a placement, and then looked at the style of my lettering to get the outline. Okay, I'm going to finish my letters. I'm going to go back and erase the guidelines, and then I'll start to add the design. Okay, once the design is added, then you'll do color and marker. So let me just pause it and fast forward to finishing my design. The magic of video. Okay, now I've got my design finished, or my outline finished, and I went through and erased all of the inside lines. The next thing I'd like you to do is do an outline around all of your lettering. Eventually what we're going to do is cut out your name design and put it on a background that has the effect of spray paint. So I'm going to do a line just outlining everything so that it's one piece. So you're not dividing the letters, but going around everything. And then I'm going to go over my outlines in Sharpie and add colored pencil. I initially thought that we would do these in marker, but I want you to be able to blend colors, so we're going to work with colored pencil instead. So let me pause this, I'll do that, and I'll come back. Okay, so there we go, it's all outlined in Sharpie, and I've got my double outline on there that I can cut. Now I'm going to start with my designs and color. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about when you're using your colored pencils. I drew my design in here first, and I thought about ways of showing not only my personal taste, but maybe a little of my personality through the colors that I chose and the design that I chose. So that's a consideration. When you're using your colored pencil, make sure that you are using a lot of pressure. We want your colors to turn out nice and bright. So I'm pushing like as hard as I can, like your hands will probably hurt if you're doing this. And you don't want a lot of the white paper to show through. I sketched out my bubble pattern on here first, and I'm gonna work on doing a gradient from yellow on the bottom to orange on the top and the middle. So you can see I'm using a lot of pressure down here on the bottom where my yellow is really vibrant. I use a lot of pressure on the orange where that color is vibrant, and then when they start to meld in the middle, that's where I'm going to let up on my pressure. So I kind of decided ahead of time where I want this orange to blend into the yellow. Now I'm coloring a little bit more lightly as the yellow meets the orange. Okay, same for the orange in this middle area. I'm going from really using a lot of pressure to a little bit lighter, and I'm going to overlap these colors. So there's still going to be a lot of coverage of colored pencils. It's just that they'll be overlapping. And because I've got the yellow on there first, the color that goes down first is going to make it lighter. So where the yellow went down first, it doesn't allow for much orange pigment to get in there, so it'll naturally kind of lighten right there. Okay, so I'm going to fill up this with orange, and then I'll start to go over with my yellow. And you'll see how these colors are going to start to blend in the middle. There's just one right on top of the other. It also helps if you're, instead of scribbling in every different direction, using the same motion so it looks a little more even. So always going back and forth horizontally or vertically. All right, let's skip over to these bubbles because I think you'll be able to see the blending a little bit better there. So I can still see like kind of a line right here. That's where I'm going to just very, very lightly blend it in a little more. And if you see too much line, you can see a little line in there. I'm gonna go back, and the lighter color you can use to blend the darker color. So if I go over it in yellow again, it's gonna start to blend it more. Use a lot of pressure. Okay, so I've got to finish up this orange part, but let me move over to the bubbles. So I did these bubbles in pink. I'm gonna blend some more color around the outside. The outside, if you're thinking about how a sphere is shaded, would be the darkest point. So I'm gonna go with a dark line around the outside, and then lightly shade the edge a little bit to give it a little three-dimension. So techniques I want you to think about when you're using your colored pencils. How can you layer them? How can you blend them? Don't use too many colors. Think about your color scheme. I used some analogous colors that would be next to each other in the color wheel, like yellow and orange. I'm also using some complementary colors that would be opposite the color wheel, like orange and blue. All right, so it kind of gives it a little bit of three dimension with the shading. Lastly, you'll see that I've got that double line around the outside of my name, so you want that all to get colored in as well. Don't forget that part. Okay, after I'm done with this, I'm going to cut out my name design, and we're going to do a spray painted background to glue them onto. All right, I got one letter done. I'm not going to finish this because I have a lot to do today, but the next step will be cutting this out. I will show you in the classroom how we are going to paint your background and then glue it on. And that's it. All right, so here we are. I've got my finished colored pencil drawing. I cut it out and glued it onto my spray painted background.